The story of Semmy Schilt doesn't begin with hype or headlines. It begins with a frame so imposing it almost feels unreal. A towering 6'11" athlete weighing nearly 290 pounds, moving with the precision of a lifelong martial artist. Long before arenas echoed with his dominance, he was just a kid in Rotterdam, raised in a household where discipline wasn't optional. Both of his parents practiced karate, and by the age of 8, he was already stepping onto the mat, absorbing fundamentals that would quietly shape one of the most overlooked yet devastating careers in combat sports history. By 18, he held a black belt. By 22, he was stepping into professional competition in Japan, facing seasoned fighters who quickly realized they were dealing with something entirely different. From the very beginning, Schilt wasn't just big. He was skilled in ways that made his size almost unfair. In Pancrase, one of Japan's most respected hybrid wrestling promotions, he began to carve out his identity. Opponents struggled not just with his reach, but with the intelligence behind every movement. He became a 3-time King of Pancrase openweight champion, dominating a division where weight classes didn't protect anyone. At that size, with that level of technique, he wasn't simply another contender. He was a problem that few could solve. The call to the UFC seemed like the natural next step, a chance to test himself on a global stage. At UFC 31, he delivered a statement. Using brutal body kicks and calculated punches, he dismantled Pete Williams in a performance that showcased just how dangerous he could be when allowed to dictate the pace. But the illusion of invincibility didn't last. At UFC 32, Josh Barnett exposed a critical weakness. Once the fight hit the ground, Schilt found himself in unfamiliar territory. Barnett's relentless pressure and grappling control led to an armbar submission, forcing Schilt to tap. It wasn't just a loss. It was a revelation. He returned to Japan with a clear understanding of what needed to change, but the path forward wasn't simple. Pride FC signed him immediately, and for a moment, it seemed like he was regaining momentum. He delivered violent finishes, knocking out opponents with a mix of knees, punches, and kicks that looked almost effortless given his size. Victories over respected names followed, and the aura began to rebuild. But then came a night that would redefine everything. On June 23, 2002, Schilt faced a relatively unknown Russian making his debut, a fighter named Fedor Emelianenko. What unfolded was less a fight and more a harsh reality check. Fedor took him down repeatedly, controlling him with a level of grappling that Schilt couldn't match. Across 3 rounds, the Dutch giant was outmaneuvered, outworked, and ultimately defeated by unanimous decision. It was the kind of loss that forces a fighter to confront uncomfortable truths. And for Schilt, those truths became impossible to ignore when 2 more submission losses followed, including another defeat to Barnett and a triangle choke from Antonio Rodrigo Nogueira. 3 losses. The same weakness exposed each time. Most fighters would have doubled down, staying in MMA to fix the problem. Schilt made a different choice entirely. He walked away from the sport. That decision would change everything. He transitioned into K-1 kickboxing, a world stripped down to its purest form. No grappling, no submissions, just striking. It was a rule set that seemed tailor-made for someone of his physical dimensions, but it still required refinement, adaptation, and patience. For 3 years, he worked his way through the system, facing elite strikers and learning how to impose his style in a sport that demanded precision at the highest level. Then came 2005 at the Tokyo Dome, the moment everything clicked. Schilt didn't just compete in the K-1 World Grand Prix finals. He took over. 3 fights in one night, each one a demonstration of controlled destruction. He outclassed, outpowered, and ultimately knocked out his way to the title. It wasn't just a victory. It was the arrival of a new kind of dominance. What followed wasn't a fluke. It was a reign. In 2006, despite suffering setbacks earlier in the year, he returned to the Grand Prix and defended his title. But something unusual happened along the way. The K-1 Rules Committee began adjusting the rules themselves, limiting clinch knee strikes and certain techniques that had become central to Schilt's success. It was a rare acknowledgement that one fighter had become so effective, the system needed to adapt. It didn't matter. Schilt adjusted faster than the rules could contain him. He continued to win, defeating elite opponents through sheer control and strategic brilliance. In 2007, he achieved something no one else had done before: 3 consecutive K-1 World Grand Prix championships, a record that still stands unmatched. At his peak, Schilt wasn't just winning. He was redefining what dominance looked like in heavyweight kickboxing. His reach turned distance into a weapon. His knees became fight-ending tools. His composure under pressure made him nearly impossible to break. But even the most dominant careers face moments of vulnerability. In 2009, fighting in Amsterdam, he suffered his first knockout loss in kickboxing at the hands of Badr Hari. For the first time, the giant fell in front of his home crowd. It was a moment that could have marked the beginning of decline. Instead, it became the setup for one of the most satisfying comebacks of his career. Later that same year, Schilt faced Hari again in the K-1 Grand Prix final. This time, there was no hesitation, no doubt. He knocked Hari out in the first round, reclaiming his position at the top and securing his fourth World Grand Prix title. It was a statement that echoed louder than any loss ever could. Even as he approached 40, he wasn't done. In 2012, at Glory 4 Tokyo, he entered another high-stakes tournament and did what he had done so many times before. He won. 4 fights in a single night, capped by a first-round TKO in the final. Another title. Another reminder that his dominance wasn't tied to a single era. Then, just as suddenly as it all seemed to rise, it ended. In 2013, doctors discovered a heart condition.
The advice was immediate and non-negotiable.
Stop fighting. No debates. New final run. No farewell tour. Schilt listened. He retired that same day, walking away from the sport with a legacy that few could match. 5 major heavyweight tournament victories. 4 K-1 World Grand Prix titles. 3 consecutive championships. A career that forced an entire organization to change its rules just to keep things competitive. And yet, despite all of it, his name rarely comes up in mainstream discussions. That's the paradox of Semmy Schilt, one of the most dominant fighters in history hidden in plain sight. So now the question turns to you. How does a fighter accomplish this much and still remain underrated? Is it the era he fought in, the lack of mainstream exposure, or something deeper about how greatness is recognized? And where does he truly rank among the all-time heavyweights across combat sports? If this story surprised you, there's more like it waiting. Hit like, subscribe, and share your thoughts below. Because sometimes the most incredible careers aren't the loudest ones. They're the ones history almost forgets.